Welcome to the Smart Tech Check podcast, hosted by Mark Vina, your home for candid, insightful, and provocative conversations about the smart home automation, security, smartphones, PC and console gaming, and much more.
Hi, my name is Mark Vina, host of the Smart Tech Check podcast. Today is Friday, January 26, 2023. Last November, it was announced that Sling Media was permanently taking its Slingbox servers down. As someone who oversaw the marketing function at Slingbox for several years, I greeted this announcement with both sadness and nostalgia. The first Slingbox launched in 2005 and forever changed the entertainment consumption landscape forever. Viewed through the lens of the early 2000s, Slingbox introduced the concept of viewing your in-home cable or satellite content outside your home in an unrestricted and convenient manner, first on PCs and then ultimately on mobile devices like smartphones and tablets. Today, that concept seems quaint as streaming content is taken for granted, especially for Gen Alpha people born after 2013, but it was game-changing and even controversial, more on that later, in 2005. Despite its disruptive impact, the Slingbox brand ultimately was much larger than its business results, and the company eventually was acquired by EchoStar. Nevertheless, it was worth reflecting on the contribution that Slingbox made to the entertainment and streaming category. With that as a backdrop, let me bring a few folks up that I'd like to have on the call. And that is, I've got Jason Krikorian, who was one of the co-founders of Slingbox back in the 2005 timeframe with his late brother Blake, to discuss the company's birth and impact. Also joining me is noted Wall Street Journal tech journalist Walt Mossberg, who covered Slingbox early in the early 2000s. And to comment on the company culture, I also have Sharon Rylander with us on the podcast, who was a senior program manager at Slingbox in the early days and played a major product and operations roles in the days leading up to the company's sale to EchoStar. Jason, Walt, and Sharon, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Good. Doing great.
Thanks for having us.
I'm just going to flash up for a second, your wonderful credentials. Jason, maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself for the few people who don't know you, because you've gone on to other things, of course, after the sale to EchoStar. But why don't we just talk a little bit about your background?
Just to keep it brief, after Sling, actually, in a very related move, joined DCM as a general partner. DCM was our largest investor at Sling. So it's the path that often happens with entrepreneurs. I've been investing in early stage technology companies since then.
Great. And Walt, nobody knows you. People do know you as a crazy Red Sox fan, but maybe they don't know you, which is obviously a joke. But maybe kind of, we'll go into your engagement with Slingbox in a few moments as one of the very early journalists that got exposed to the technology. But what are you doing now? And, just kind of a welcome about where you are right now.
Well, in addition to what's on the slide, which is the key stuff, I retired about 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm working now for something, a nonprofit called the News Literacy Project, where we try to teach middle and high school students how to tell fact from fiction online. And that's another podcast, but that's what I'm doing.
And Sharon, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast because I don't think we met each other. I was at Slingbox kind of in the second half of the life of the company. You were there, I think, in the very early days. Yep. So you obviously have a lot of commentary on the culture of the company that we'll get into, but tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I basically connect people with technologists. So people building products with the people who will end up using them. And I do that through UX testing, beta programs, et cetera, but really more of the strategy of how that all gets laid out within a company. Kind of a startup junkie. Sling was definitely a favorite. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Well, let's go into the first topic here. I'll bring that slide up in a second here. And this is for you, Jason. How did the concept of Slingbox come to be? I mean, what was kind of its, what kind of led to its birth, so to speak?
Yeah. So my brother Blake and I always wanted to work together, to found a company together. And it was born well, we started a different company called ID8 Group. It was largely a consulting company. We helped consumer electronics and other technology companies with product strategy, new product conceptualization, and the like. But we would also tool around on our own time with interesting products. And we were living in the San Mateo area. We had an office downtown San Mateo, and we're huge sports fans. We're big Giants fans, Niners fans, Warriors, all that. And we wanted, of course, to be able to, well, two of us were in our office to watch the game. This was actually 2002 or 1. It was the year the Giants went to the World Series and lost horribly in Game 6. But we had a hard time getting a satellite dish. Our landlord wouldn't let us put a satellite dish on the side of the building, and it occurred to us that we were already accessing some video from our home in the form of a webcam, kind of an early kind of security application. And we thought, hey, maybe we can do the same thing with just a different source. In this case, a cable box, a TiVo is what we were using at the time. And started tooling around. I mean, for that first several months, it was me kind of maintaining the consulting business, and Blake tooling around and creating a prototype using PC, open source utilities and the like, creating a pretty reliable application, and it worked fairly well. Our first thought, and this is in line with some of our previous practice, was to take it to some of our clients that we worked with. And we worked with Samsung, AOL, Microsoft, ViewSonic. And we thought, hey, maybe this is an opportunity for us to license what we were developing and make some money with it that way. And we thought it was an interesting way to get to market. And a bit surprisingly, none of them bit. They were either concerned about the potential copyright issues that they thought might exist. Some just didn't quite understand it. Others were more interested in finding a way to monetize on a monthly basis, and it just didn't fit what they were looking to do. And it might have died right then, but for the fact that a friend of ours, Tammy Helm, who was doing some work with Walt at the time, I think Walt was, he can go into more detail on this, but I think Walt was getting ready for D2, the second year of the All Things D conference in Southern California. And Tammy was helping, I think, pull that together. And we had lunch with her, and she said, I'm doing this thing, and you should show Walt this, because we gave her a demonstration. She said, this is pretty cool. And that was awesome. I mean, this was a time where, Walt was and is a legend, but especially at this time, I think Web 2.0 was just getting started, and kind of the blogosphere, et cetera. And so, the one standard bearer more than anything was Walt's was it a Thursday column you had? That personal technology column. And so that was just extremely exciting. And, I'll let Walt describe the interaction with Blake, but I stayed back to kind of man the servers and make sure everything stayed on task and worked okay, and sent Blake off to meet Walt, I think in DC, if I'm not mistaken. So that was kind of the initiation, and really, if it wasn't for Walt, I'm not sure we'd have a company or a product or all the experiences that came with that.
Well, that's wonderful background information, Jason, because I think a lot of people kind of always ask, how did something come to be? And in fact, before the call, Walt and I were kind of sharing our stories. I was very well acquainted with Slingbox before I joined the company. And, I can remember very specifically watching the Giants beat the Green Bay Packers in a playoff game, I think it was 2008 in the Ice Bowl. And I was watching it outside of Samsung's offices in South Korea. And I immediately knew that, I'll never be able to live without something like this. It was, to me, manna from heaven, but let's get into a bit of the press reaction, though, because I think that's really interesting. And I guess the perfect person to talk about that really is Walt, because Walt, you were there early on, and let's talk about your story and how you got engaged with Jason and company.
Well, so first of all, thank you for the nice things you said, Jason. I'm not sure it's that big. I was that big a deal, but thanks. So what happened was I got this call from Blake, who I don't think I knew at the time at all, and I was. You're right. We were pulling together the second All Things D conference, the D conference, as it was called, and we. One of the things that I had to get speakers, but I also had to get people to do demos of cool new products. In addition, of course, I was always looking for topics for my column, products to review. So Blake calls and he outlines this thing, which he says can do this, can take your cable or your recorded TiVo stuff from your house and let you watch it on a PC anywhere, basically in the world where you have an internet connection. And I thought, well, I'm not sure I believe this, but he said, can I come out and show it to you? Because I was in DC, you're right. And he came out and he showed it to me and Katie Barrett. Katie was my tech reviewing junior partner, and very smart. And so Blake, this is the short version. There's always a long version with Blake, but this is the short version. He shows up in my office and he says, I said, we talked for a little small talk. And then I said, okay, are you ready for the demo? And he said, I think the Wi-Fi in here is too good. It's too good. Because we had better Wi-Fi than the rest of the Wall Street Journal operation in DC because we needed it. And he said, let's go around the corner to the Starbucks. Now, I suspect he had already been in the Starbucks and knew it would work there. I certainly would have. Am I right, Jason? I mean, that's
I'm sure. I certainly hope so.
We go into the Starbucks. Now, the thing about the Starbucks, of course, was, and remember, this is 2004, I think, or something like
2004.
that. The Starbucks had worse Wi-Fi coming into the Starbucks than in my office, and way more people using it. So the bandwidth was much worse, and that was his point. And so we squeezed into one of those tiny Starbucks tables. We got lattes, and he opens up his laptop, and the next thing we know, we're watching cable TV from a house. I guess it was his house or your house. I don't know, somebody's house, Sharon's house. I don't know, in Silicon Valley, and we're watching it in a Starbucks in 2 blocks from the White House in DC, and I thought that was pretty great, pretty cool. I wasn't even thinking about sports yet at the time. Just the idea that the TV was whatever was on TV live at whatever time in the afternoon this was coming in. And then I actually called Katie, my ex reviewing partner, this morning to try to remember which country. He had a Slingbox in a house in some foreign country. Do you remember what it was?
Probably
Jason?
India.
India.
It was probably Bangalore, India.
I thought it was India. And so there's a TV broadcast coming in, not in English, or partly in English and partly in some other, and it was in India. And he said, this is coming in from India. And it was pretty incredible. And he sent me one. I tested it, and I did 2 things at that point. I put him on stage at I arranged to put him on stage at the D conference because I had complete control over which products we demoed and which product. It was essentially, for a lot of companies, a launch platform if they got on that stage, because we had this extremely premier group of not only speakers, Bill Gates and Steve Jobs and all those people spoke at the conference on a regular basis, but the audience was full of VCs and founders and journalists and everybody was there. And I will remember. I will tell you that he got up. I can't remember if you were you there at that?
I was there. Yeah.
You were there. Were you on stage?
Not on stage. Not on stage.
So he gets up on stage and he does the demo, and I was on stage. The way these demos worked was that Karen and I were on stage with them, or I was on stage alone. I can't remember. And he does the demo, and I'm pretty sure that the first thing I said to him was, "How much money have you set aside for legal costs?"
Yeah, that was definitely up there.
Because I just figured, I mean, the networks and the rights holders, the studios, hated the idea of TiVo, which was up and running and was doing time shifting, but you were doing place shifting. You were essentially retransmitting that broadcast. Now, obviously, whoever had a Slingbox was already paying for it legally, but still you were retransmitting it because the contract which you signed as a cable user probably didn't allow you to send it somewhere else. Anyway, he laughed and he said he didn't expect any problems. I think something like on that order of that. Maybe you said it. I don't know. And they never. One quandary that I always had is, why weren't you sued out of business for this? This was fantastic.
I mean, I thought it was probably going to be a 50-50 chance that we end up in that. But just, one other thing about kind of the run up to the conference. I mean, when Blake got back from DC, he said, we didn't have anything. We didn't have any money. We didn't even have a name. We just had this idea. And he says, Walt wants us to show at the conference, and this is 2 months away. And we didn't, and he wants to review the product when it comes out. And at that point, we had to make a decision, like, do we take Walt up on this thing? And I mean, long story short, like after a lot of deliberation, it's like, this is too great of an opportunity. So it was 2 months of sprint to figure out the name. What are we going to call this thing? Get it up and going. And it was exhilarating. It was great. But I think, well, to get to your question, because I think that's the other side, like the initial media reaction, like there was the media, like Walt, and how was the product received from a consumer perspective, but then there was the media from the business side. And it was fascinating. I think, like you said, it was an interesting time. In addition to TiVo, we were also right on the heels of Napster. The Supreme Court was about to hear the case of Grokster. And I think actually that helped us a lot. I think in those cases that those were technologies that were allowing for maybe what you'd call indiscriminate redistribution to lots of other people. And we, it's very C2C was the kind of the thing. And we were, what I tried to call, it never really stuck, but me to me, which is like, I got this stuff and I'm just giving it to myself.
Oh, that was a pretty good slogan. I don't remember hearing that.
It never stuck. I don't know.
I probably would have stuck it in the column. I would just say, Mark, I want to hear from Sharon, and I know you have other things to say, but I looked up the column. I printed out the 2005 column. Yes, ancient paper print, and I talked about the tests. I watched a Red Sox game because, unlike Mark, I root for a better team for character.
Yeah, thanks, Walt.
I watched a Red Sox game. Remember, this is 2004, which was the year the Red Sox broke the 86-year curse. I watched a game in Tokyo. I was in Tokyo, and it was similar to your Samsung story, but I was in Tokyo, and I watched a Red Sox game. I watched stuff in my office from my home, which was about a dozen miles away, and then I watched CNBC Live on a laptop on a public Wi-Fi connection. And then I was in Boston, and I watched a Washington Nationals baseball game that was unavailable in Red Sox country up there. And I watched this Red Sox game from Tokyo, which was fantastic. And I used the column to talk about place shifting. which is what I think this was. People were getting used to the idea of time shifting, but I talked about play shifting. And I'll just say one more thing. The column ends, and I said I had gone through some of the issues, because there were a few issues that I knew about. You probably knew about many more issues that were going on behind the things you had to put out fires to fix. But I just said, still, I really like the Slingbox and can heartily recommend it to roaming TV lovers. It is a very good product that finally makes TV play shifting a reality. So that was my first experience with it, and I'm glad.
No, I appreciate that. Well, that's a wonderful perspective. And what I want to do is I want to show a few commercials over the Slingbox era that will go into the next topic we're going to talk about, and that was the messaging challenges with Slingbox. Because if you put a 2004, 2005 hat on, televisions were far different. They didn't have smart interfaces. They still had composite connections. They were, attaching a Slingbox was not. It wasn't impossible to do, but it required a little bit of work to do, and to do it correctly, especially from a remote control standpoint. And then you had the issue of, you had some of the issues that Jason brought up in terms of, hey, when you look at the television industry back in 2002 or 3, they were horrified by what streaming could potentially do. They certainly had a lot of heartburn over extending your paid cable experience outside the home, that whole fair use issue, which ultimately prevailed. But it was a totally different world. And, streaming was starting to ramp back then with the likes of Netflix and others. But let me pull up some of the commercials, and then Sharon, we're going to pull you in, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the messaging challenges to this. So here's the first commercial.
Brake lights out. Let's pull them over.
Oh, come on. The game's on. Okay.
Please pull your vehicle to the right. Come on, get outside. Get outside.
Hands up.
Come on, three-pointer.
The Slingbox lets you watch your home TV through the internet on your laptop or mobile phone.
Post up, post up.
What are you talking about?
Slingbox.
Now that commercial was before I arrived on the scene, and what we did was we when I got the Slingbox, one thing we tried to drill down on is we did know, based on survey information that we did, that people who did have a Slingbox were incredibly loyal. I mean, you couldn't pry it out of their dead hands if you tried. So our agency came up with an interesting campaign that actually did get a lot of clicks and a lot of views back in the day. So let me bring up this commercial as well.
Hello, I'm Dr. Tatad, and I'm here to talk to you today about QAP, Can't Watch Anywhere pain. Those who suffer from QAP believe they can watch live television anywhere, but then they find out that they can't. Maybe their shows aren't available outside the US, or even their own office. Maybe the channels that are available aren't even worth watching. And maybe that app they just purchased only streams in certain regions, or worse yet, streams so slowly that the game they're trying to watch is over before it even loads. What then? QAP can lead to symptoms like confusion, frustration, even chronic cable fatigue. Are you up to your eyeballs in QAP? Because if so, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. I'm here to let you know that QAP is common. It affects millions of TV lovers all over the world, just like you. Take my patient John, for example. John's from Philly, but as a sales guy, he travels a lot for his work. John recently found himself in Phoenix on the Eagles opening day. No problem, he thought. He had just purchased that fancy sports app that plays all the local games live, but sadly, when John tried to launch the app, the only game he could get was the Cardinals. Wrong birds. John soon discovered what millions of others already know, that to the app, anywhere really means only somewhere. And now John has a real bad case of the QAP. Another patient, Jenny, often travels with her family to her vacation cabin in Regina, Canada. Seriously, it's real. Look it up. I couldn't believe it either. While visiting Regina, Jenny wanted to keep the kids out of her hair on a rainy day with her streaming TV app from her cable company. Imagine her surprise when she discovered that the services she pays for won't stream outside the US. Not even the beaver capital of the Great White North counts as anywhere to big cable. Now, Jenny has the quap. But no more, because the cure for quap is here. Slingbox. With Slingbox, any content on your TV is available live on any device, anywhere in the world. So don't put up with quap. You deserve to watch TV any way you want. Get Slingbox at slingbox.com or a retailer near you, and visit don'tgetquap.com or find us on Facebook. With Slingbox, if it's on your TV, it's on.
I think that was probably after we sold the company, because I don't even recall.
No, it was after the EchoStar purchase. It was during that era, and I remember some of the, and you know some of these names, and I won't mention them, on the EchoStar management team, which was a very conservative lot, as you probably know. They thought that ad was pretty edgy.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that you ran it. I mean, and that was after I left the company. It actually just reminds me briefly, our very first ad was in print in the USA Today. That's a sign of the times. And it was a half-page ad, and it said, introducing the Slingbox, the best thing to happen to a traveling businessman since pay-per-view porn. And we got calls from Best Buy execs and CompUSA execs, and they're like, no, don't do that. So that was the last of that.
Well, Jason, I will tell you, because you alerted me to this morning. I was aware of this other ad that I'm going to show for a second, and your brother had a wonderful sense of humor. I think I met him once when we had a Slingbox party, but this ad, which I know you had never ran, you talk about edgy. So let's show that real quickly, because I think it is a wonderful ad.
My name is Blake Krikorian. People often ask me how the Slingbox came to be. Well, the answer is complex and surprising. Okay, you dudes are telling me this thing turns nuclear waste into drinkable water. And this one can actually reverse global warming. Pretty sweet. And this thing lets you watch your home TV through the internet on your computer or mobile phone. Anywhere. Are you kidding me? I'll take this one in exchange for what we talked about.
That's a lot bigger than we agreed to, guys!
As you can see, great sacrifices have been made. So please, buy one.
And cut.
God, things I do for this company. It's like, guys, just.
So, Blake.
That was the very definition of edgy, I think. Probably today that would be G-rated if you look at some of the
totally.
stuff.
Yeah, but that was to me, that was Blake. that was pretty good. I know it was a scripted commercial, but I could have seen him almost ad-libbing that.
For sure.
So, Sharon, let's talk about that for a moment. The Slingbox audience, the messaging challenges, because the interesting thing about all these ads, and this again was during a time period where at least when I was at Slingbox, we had a lot of trouble convincing people that streaming was different from what Slingbox did. I mean, if you didn't have a satellite or a cable subscription, Slingbox really had no value. But we constantly had that issue. Oh, if I buy a Slingbox, can I stream Netflix? Can I stream other stuff that was coming online at the time? So can you comment a little bit about the messaging challenges you think that kind of arose?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a disruptive technology, it's really hard to describe that value because it literally has never existed in the world before. So there's no model.
Mm-hmm.
The closest thing we had to it at the time was TiVo. We were kind of on the heels of TiVo, and they had time shifting. So it made sense that we were place shifting, but still that concept was so hard for the ordinary person to really understand until they experienced it.
Right.
Yeah. And
no, that was the interesting thing is that we had research that once you played with Slingbox, you never wanted to go back, but you needed a cable subscription and or a satellite subscription. And some of the issues that Walt raised in his review were certainly issues as well. That that it wasn't the easiest product to set up, and of course, in the early days, you had to view content on your laptop with a Windows app, and I think they had a Mac app, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But
Yep.
then the mobile device apps came online later, and to me, that kind of blew the water off things, that you could watch your out-of-home content on an iPad or an iPhone. I mean, to me, that was absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
It was a kludge product in many ways, right?
Mhm.
It was like a moment in time technology, and to your point, Mark, like the setup was not easy. There was like a ton of dependencies, right? And Sharon drove generations of beta tests, and so she was at the forefront of this. But I suspect that a reason why you went to the Starbucks instead of in your Wall Street Journal office was because of maybe some network security. Like there was a lot that we had to do to make the port forwarding work on the outbound, to make sure that it worked on the inbound, and a lot of that was because we took some steps to avoid relay servers and things to make sure that it was point to point to keep us in the clear legally, at least what we thought.
Well, actually,
Stuff.
just to correct that, I mean, your point makes a lot of sense for most offices, but
Yeah.
I had insisted that we have a completely separate consumer type Wi-Fi network in my office.
That makes sense.
Which was not under the control of the IT.
Okay, got it.
The deal they said, well, if you do that, we're not responsible for it. I said, I don't want you even touching it.
Yeah.
I'll deal with it like it's in my house.
Mhm.
And if there's a problem I can't solve, I'll call the cable provider.
Right on.
But we actually, when they pushed back at me, I said, look, I review product for consumers, so I need to have a in the office
Sure.
the same setup they would have at home. So, but Blake may not have known that. I may not have told him that.
Yeah.
And so you guys may have just said better to get out of this environment and into a Starbucks. But it made the demo much more dramatic.
The last topic I want to hit, and I want to start with Sharon on this, and this is the thing that it's been remarkable to me, honestly, because I got there kind of the second half of the life of the company up to its sale to Dish, the second sale, I should say, or the transition to Dish Networks. Let's talk about the company culture, because companies have all distinct cultures. Apple has a culture, Google has a culture, Dell has a culture, and what I always was fascinated with Sling Media is the dedication of folks, tremendous engineering talent. Many folks were there for the duration of the longevity of the company. And Sharon, could you comment a little bit about that, because it was absolutely remarkable. And I will tell you, I don't think I ever, I may have met Blake once, but they were, even if you talk to Slingbox employees today, they talk about Blake, they talk about Jason in almost reverent, and I'm not trying to make you blush, Jason, but they almost talk in almost reverent terms. So what was the secret there, Sharon? Because you were there during the early days.
It's true. Everything you're saying is spot on. Blake, rest in peace, was larger than life. And everybody wanted to do whatever they could to just be a part of that party. And I remember before I got to Sling, I was that annoying person who would send emails over the weekend so that they were first, top of the inbox on Monday morning. My first weekend at Sling, I did that. And I immediately got responses back. I thought, I've met my match. I'm either at the right place or the wrong place. The dedication was very high for sure. And we also all respected each other a lot. It was very fast paced. We got in a lot of arguments, but they were always done in a respectful way, because at the end of the day, we knew we would end up with the best product.
Right.
And that was at its core driven by Blake's passion. We knew no matter how hard we were working, he was working harder. And then Jason was there as like the
I was there too.
Force.
No,
yeah,
I know. Blake was just the driver. I mean, the enthusiasm and joy for what we were doing. I think Blake showed more enthusiasm than almost anyone I've ever known. And then I think the other principle might be like empathy for the consumer, because especially because we were creating a product that we knew was going to create some challenges depending on your setup. And we're all, in the end of the day, super enthusiastic consumers. And we've had 1,000 bad experiences as consumers where you're just like, you think to yourself, did anybody use this product that helped make it? Because it's unbelievable, right? So, and that was why, Sharon's role functionally was so important, right? Right close to the consumer. And then I think what I've shared with Sharon before is like, I think any company culture, it's top down, but I think what's even more critical, I think, is to have people in the organization that can repeat it and amplify it throughout. And Sharon was a great example of that. Both Blake and I commented on that often, and we're super grateful to have Sharon and others like her in the company.
Well,
Thank you. Yeah, I will never forget you two saying that. It blew me away at the buyout. You kind of both really made a point to go around to everybody individually and tell them how much you appreciated them and for what and all that sort of thing. And which in and of itself meant a lot, right? That's how close we all were and felt like family. And it's all cliche, but we all really experienced that. And when you got to me, I just, I was so unexpected to hear that, but it was very appreciated.
Well, what's interesting is that as someone who covers a lot of high-tech companies out here in the Valley and who have met a lot of very senior people at the CEO level, those are not common traits that you see, at a leadership level, that empathy feeling, not only for the consumer or the customer, I think those are important points, but the employee population as well. And I also think it's a function of the fact that folks when you're working on a product that is going to move the needle. I mean, this is not a USB drive. This is something that really, I think, changed the way people live their lives in a more productive and entertaining way. I think that's reflective of the employees that you attracted to the company. And just in the couple of minutes we have left here, Walt, how do you think Slingbox will be remembered? I mean, if you had to kind of look back, a couple of thoughts on that, maybe.
I think it was one of the kind of landmark products, but it probably won't be remembered as well as it should be, because it had as a couple of you have mentioned, it did not have an enormous broad base of users. I mean, it was every tech journalist wrote about it. And wrote about it again every time a new one came out. I don't know how many times you were in my office, Mark, with, after the sale or
with other products.
I became less and less interested the more it consolidated into a big cable or satellite company. But I think it should be remembered as one of the breakthrough products. But I think there probably are a lot of people who don't. Certainly, younger people don't know about it.
Sure.
They have no.
I think for young people, it's odd that it even needed to exist.
That's correct, and they can't conceive of a world where there wasn't streaming. Even though I personally think streaming is, and I'm not the only one. I mean, people that know more about streaming than I do think it's in trouble. You just can't quite see it yet, but it's in trouble. But this was a really cool, that word really applied, an important product. Thank God you weren't sued out of existence. And I just wish more people would know enough to recognize that.
Sharon, your thoughts on how Slingbox will be remembered? Sling Media?
Well, right now, the reality is the Sling brand is out there. And so I get a lot of comments from, people who are pretty far away from what we were all doing back then, who are like, oh, you didn't you work, that sort of thing. That's kind of funny. But honestly, I think internally, it's the Big Lebowski. Is how we're going to remember it. The company.
Interesting analogy.
Yeah.
Jason, to kind of wrap this up, how would you like Sling remembered given your contribution, your brother's contribution. I mean, as Sharon rightfully said, the Sling name still lives on with their streaming service, which added more confusion while there was overlap there. I know because I was there managing that whole transition. But Jason, just to kind of wrap it up for us, how do you think the company will be remembered?
Well, I think broadly in terms of like the industry impact, et cetera, I think I agree with Walt. I think it's a bit of a footnote in history, but I do think at the time we might have helped accelerate the movement towards streaming. I think the media industry broadly had just been through a period with audio music where they lost control. And while they weren't that threatened by what we were doing because of the way we contained it, I think it made it pretty clear that, okay, if people are going to start streaming to themselves, like, let's get ahead of this and let's actually serve them with offerings that make sense. So I was pretty proud that things like Hulu kind of came on really fast on the heels of what we did. So that was great. And then I think, it'll also have a legacy just with the people that were involved, and, it's Blake's legacy more than any, and just, energy, enthusiasm, and innovation, and just happy to be part of it. It was a great experience in my life.
Well, guys, listen, really, thank you for contributing to the podcast. They really we went over by about 10 minutes, but who cares, because the content's great, and as I think it's a suitable way to remember the company. Thanks for taking the time to join me for today's podcast. For our viewing and listening audience, please make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons at the end of today's podcast. Hit those big QR codes to subscribe to my newsletter and to the podcast if you like the content, and I hope you do. And please follow me on Twitter at Mark Vina Tech Guy. And until next time, have a great week, and thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Mark.